What if I told you that in one quiet, deliberate move, Prince William may have just erased the royal legacy of Harry and Meghan's children forever? Imagine the weight of those words. Not whispered speculation, not rumor. A decision. Final. Cold. Unshakable. A line drawn in stone. That's the reality we're about to unravel. Because behind the polished gates of Kensington and the grandeur of Buckingham, a storm has been brewing. One so personal, so vicious, that it cuts not just through brothers, but through generations yet to come. And now, in the shadows of King Charles's reign, Prince William has finally revealed his hand. He has blocked Archie and Lilibet from ever receiving royal titles. No prince, no princess, no chance at redemption. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let that sink in for a moment. For years, Meghan Markle spoke of the pain of her children being denied titles. She framed it as a question of safety, dignity, recognition. Harry, too, believed that once Charles ascended to the throne, the promise of titles for Archie and Lilibet would naturally follow. After all, wasn't it written in royal tradition? Wasn't it expected? And yet, just when the Sussexes thought that royal blood alone might secure their children's place, William intervened. Not with hesitation, not with compromise, but with absolute clarity. Not under my reign. Now, pause and ask yourself, what would drive a brother to make such a devastating choice? Is it about jealousy, revenge, or something far more complicated? The survival of the monarchy itself? This isn't a decision made lightly. It's not about petty grudges or emotional outbursts. This is about legacy, control, power. It's about rewriting the rules so that Harry and Meghan's children are permanently sidelined. Their royal connection severed. Their legacy erased before it could even begin. And here's the twist that makes this all the more shocking. King Charles, the one man who could have intervened, chose silence. That silence wasn't just an absence of protest. It was consent, approval, the tacit agreement that William's choice was necessary, even if it meant breaking Harry's heart. But let's not jump too far ahead. To understand why William acted, we need to peel back the layers. This story isn't just about one decision. It's about years of betrayal, mistrust, resentment. It's about Harry and Meghan's war with the institution and William's determination to protect it. It's about a monarchy bruised by scandal and determined to survive. And it's about two children caught in the middle of a struggle that began long before they were even born. Now, imagine the moment Harry found out. The words echoing down the phone line. His children's futures officially sealed shut. Their titles are gone. Harry, who once saw his role as protector, suddenly powerless. Meghan, who believed she had secured a royal legacy for her children, collapsing in tears. Their vision of a modern monarchy built around their brand, their narrative, shattered in one brutal stroke. Do you feel that tension? That sense of inevitability? The weight of choices that can't be undone? Because this is where the story begins. And it's not just about Harry and Meghan. It's about what William's decision means for the monarchy itself. For George, Charlotte, Louis, his own children. For the line of succession. For the way history will remember this era of royals. Think about it. 1,000 years of tradition, titles passed down like sacred relics. And now, a deliberate break. Archie and Lilibet denied what would once have been their birthright. Not by accident, not by oversight, but by design, by choice, by William. This decision isn't just personal. It's historical. It shapes the monarchy of tomorrow. And here's the cruel irony. While Meghan and Harry may rage, may plot, may grieve, they can do nothing to change it. William has outmaneuvered them, permanently. But here's the question I want you to wrestle with. Was William right? Was this a necessary act to preserve the monarchy's dignity? Or was it a ruthless strike driven by bitterness and fear? As we peel back this story, we'll uncover secrets whispered in corridors, leaks carefully planted in the press, and private conversations that reveal the raw truth behind the decision. This isn't just about titles. It's about power. And power, in the royal family, is never shared. It is guarded, protected, enforced. So buckle in, because the next hour will take you deeper into the world of betrayal, ambition, and royal survival than you've ever gone before. But before we step into the first chapter, before we unpack William's private announcement that sealed Archie and Lilibet's fate, I'll leave you with this thought. If William can erase the legacy of his own niece and nephew in one cold, deliberate decision, what else is he capable of? And that is where the story begins. What happens when a future king takes a private stand against his own blood? What happens when the heir to the throne, bound by tradition and duty, chooses to step outside those lines and redraw them for himself? That is exactly what Prince William did the day he delivered his private announcement. The moment he officially decided that Archie and Lilibet would never, ever bear the titles of prince and princess. It wasn't done in public. There were no flashing cameras, no press releases. Instead, it happened in the hushed confines of palace walls, during a meeting that insiders describe as tense, deliberate, and final. William didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply made his intentions clear, in a way so calm it was almost chilling. Not under my reign. For words, cold as steel, a statement that ended years of speculation in an instant. And those words, once spoken, could never be taken back. Now, imagine the faces in that room. Senior aides stiffening, advisors lowering their eyes, realizing the weight of what had just been decided. Even seasoned courtiers, who have weathered decades of royal storms, were reportedly left in stunned silence. Because this wasn't a spat between brothers. This wasn't another tabloid headline. This was the heir to the throne exercising his will over the very future of the monarchy. Here's the thing. William didn't just say no, he locked the door. He made it impossible for the titles to ever pass to Archie and Lilibet. Advisors were instructed to formalize it. Legal experts were consulted. Protocols were drawn up. This wasn't a casual remark. It was policy. But here's the question that lingers. Why now? Why, at this exact moment, did William strike? Some say it was Charles's declining health. With whispers of transition growing louder, William knew he couldn't wait until he was king. He had to set the tone now, before anyone else could make a move. Others argue it was the relentless behavior of Harry and Meghan, the interviews, the Netflix shows, the memoirs, the accusations. Every word spoken by the Sussexes only deepened William's mistrust. Every betrayal only convinced him further that granting Archie and Lilibet titles would be a disaster waiting to happen. Think about it. Could you imagine Meghan Markle introducing herself on the world stage as the mother of a prince and princess of the United Kingdom, while simultaneously launching lawsuits, memoirs, and Netflix exposés against the institution itself? To William, that wasn't just uncomfortable. It was unacceptable. Now, you may be asking, how exactly did William deliver this blow? Sources claim the announcement came during a series of high-level discussions about the monarchy's future. Advisors raised the issue of titles for Harry's children. William, calm but resolute, cut them off. It won't happen, he said. And when pressed, he doubled down. Not under my reign. That phrase was like a knife through the heart of centuries-old tradition. You see, by long-standing precedent, the grandchildren of the monarch are entitled to royal titles. That means Archie and Lilibet, by virtue of being King Charles's grandchildren, should automatically qualify as prince and princess. But William? He wasn't about to let that precedent dictate his reign. He saw an exception, and he seized it. And this is where it gets darker. Because it wasn't just a refusal. It was an erasure. William reportedly insisted that steps be taken to make the decision permanent, a safeguard ensuring that even if Charles wished to intervene, his hands would be tied. Insiders claim legal frameworks were discussed, language was drafted, and the possibility of issuing new letters patent, a kind of royal decree, was floated. Do you see the enormity of that? William wasn't just reacting. He was planning. He was making sure that Harry and Meghan's children could never be reinstated into the royal fold, no matter what happened. But what about Harry? Did William think about how his brother would take this? Or did he no longer care? Reports suggest William made his announcement with full knowledge that it would devastate Harry. And in some ways, that was the point. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity, about drawing a line that could not be crossed. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Because William wasn't alone in that room. Sources say senior members of the royal household nodded in silent agreement. Advisors, long frustrated with Harry and Meghan's unpredictable behavior, quietly approved. Even Camilla, Queen Consort, was said to have backed William's stance, arguing that the monarchy could not afford to carry more scandals into the next generation. But was King Charles there? That remains the great mystery. Some insiders claimed Charles was present, listening quietly, offering no objection. Others insist William relayed his decision afterward, and Charles, weary from health battles and the burdens of kingship, simply let it stand. In either case, the result was the same: silence. Silence that signaled acceptance. Now, put yourself in Harry's shoes. Imagine being blindsided by the knowledge that your children's futures have been sealed, not by tradition, not by your father, but by your own brother. Imagine the sting of betrayal, the realization that your family's legacy is being rewritten without your voice, your consent, your presence. Because that's what makes this story truly heartbreaking. It wasn't just William making a decision. It was William taking away Harry's last thread of connection to the royal family. By blocking those titles, William wasn't just punishing Harry. He was ensuring that Harry's children, innocent children, would carry the weight of exile forever. And the palace? They didn't leak the details immediately. They waited. They let the decision simmer behind closed doors, leaving Harry to discover it in the cruelest way possible, secondhand. Through whispers. Through carefully placed words. And when he did find out, when the reality hit him, the reaction was explosive. But that, my friends, is the next chapter in this saga. Because the way Harry learned of William's announcement, and the way he reacted, shook the foundations of the palace itself. What did he do? Did he scream? Did he threaten? Did he collapse? The truth is even more shocking than you think. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the truth reaches the one person it was designed to hurt the most? What happens when a brother, already scarred by years of betrayal and bitterness, finally learns that his children's royal futures have been destroyed with a single decision? That's where we are now, the moment Prince Harry discovered William's private announcement. And let me tell you, it didn't just sting. It shattered him. Harry wasn't told in a dignified, respectful way. There was no quiet sit-down between brothers. No heartfelt conversation from his father. No warning, no grace. Instead, Harry found out in the worst possible way, indirectly. A whispered comment. A leak through palace aides. A message that reached Montecito like a dagger hidden in silk. Imagine it. You're thousands of miles away, separated not just by distance, but by mistrust. You've stepped away from the very institution you once served, believing you can still protect your family, believing you can still claim your rightful place when the time comes. And then, through back channels, you hear it. Your brother has spoken. Your brother has decided. And what he's decided means your children's legacy is gone. Forever. For Harry, this wasn't just a political blow. This was personal. Deeply personal. When Meghan heard the words, her response was immediate. Tears. She reportedly wept openly, repeating one phrase again and again. He erased them. He erased them. For her, this wasn't about monarchy mechanics or constitutional quirks. This was about identity, recognition, belonging. Meghan had fought tooth and nail to establish her children as legitimate heirs of their royal bloodline. She had pushed for security, for acknowledgement, for dignity. And now, in one icy stroke, William had wiped it all away. But Harry? His reaction was more volcanic. At first, silence. Then fury. Then despair. Reports from those close to the couple suggest Harry went into a tailspin that day, pacing the house, clutching his phone, calling friends in London for confirmation, demanding answers that no one wanted to give. And when he finally realized it was true, that William had not only refused titles but blocked them permanently, Harry's fury exploded. Think about that moment. The same Harry who once stood shoulder to shoulder with William at their mother's funeral. The same Harry who fought alongside his brother in the trenches of grief, now realizing that the bond between them had been severed, not by circumstance, but by choice. William's choice. So what did Harry do? Did he pick up the phone and call William directly? Not at first. Insiders claim he called Charles. He wanted his father to step in, to overrule, to restore what had been lost. But Charles didn't. Charles, weakened by health battles and emotionally drained from the constant Sussex drama, gave no assurances. He didn't fight back. He didn't argue. His silence was an answer in itself. Can you imagine what that feels like? To reach for your father and find only emptiness. To call for protection and hear nothing in return? That silence, perhaps more than William's words, broke Harry. And Meghan? She fed his rage. She reminded him of every slight, every wound. The wedding drama. The racism claims. The relentless UK tabloids. She painted William's decision as proof. Proof that the royal family had always intended to erase them, to diminish them, to cast them out. And Harry, already spiraling, believed her. Now, here's where it gets more dangerous. Harry didn't just rant privately. He began speaking in threats. Friends say he told Meghan, and later, confidants, that if his brother wanted to play dirty, he could too. They don't know what I know, he reportedly said. If they want war, I'll give them war. Can you feel the temperature rising? This wasn't just brotherly conflict anymore. This was war talk. Harry felt cornered, stripped of his children's future, abandoned by his father, and betrayed by his brother. And when a man feels he has nothing left to lose, that's when he becomes most dangerous. Meanwhile, Meghan saw opportunity in the chaos. While Harry raged, she strategized. For her, William's decision could be spun into a narrative, a story of cruelty, of injustice, of racism revisited. She urged Harry to think about the American audience, the one audience that still sympathized with them. If the British royals had denied Archie and Lilibet their rightful titles, then surely America would see the monarchy for what it really was: archaic, cold, unforgiving. But here's the contradiction. While Meghan wanted to weaponize the news, Harry wanted revenge. Two different responses, one strategic, one emotional, and together, they fueled a storm that neither could control. But let's step back for a moment and ask, why did William choose to let Harry find out this way? Why wasn't there a direct conversation? Some say William wanted distance, that a clean cut was better than endless arguments. Others argue it was deliberate humiliation, a way of showing Harry just how powerless he had become. Either way, the damage was done. Picture Harry that night, alone in Montecito, staring out at the California sky. A man who once wore the uniform of his country, once represented the crown across the globe, now realizing that his own brother had stripped his children of the one thing that tied them back to that legacy. His rage turned to grief. His grief turned to resolve. Because from that day forward, Harry was no longer just estranged. He was an enemy. And in his mind, enemies are fought with truth bombs, with revelations, with memoirs that can scorch the earth. But William? He had already seen this coming. He had prepared for it. And the palace was ready to strike back in ways Harry could never have predicted. So what did Harry do next? How did his anger explode into action? And how did William stay 3 steps ahead of him the whole time? And what came after Harry's fury would shake the palace even harder than William's announcement itself? What does it take to slam a door so tightly shut that it can never be reopened? What does it take for a prince, the future king, to not only say no, but to make sure that no becomes law? That's exactly what William did. And in Chapter 3, we dive into the legal and constitutional block that sealed Archie and Lilibet's fate permanently. Because William's decision wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just an angry brother lashing out. No, this was something far more deliberate, far more calculated. William ensured that his refusal would be embedded into the very structure of the monarchy. A legal firewall, a constitutional barrier, something that couldn't simply be overturned when Charles was gone or when public opinion shifted. Now, here's where things get chilling. We often imagine the monarchy as symbolic, draped in tradition and ceremony. But behind the gilded walls, the crown is also a machine of law, precedent, and constitutional power. Titles are not just decorative flourishes. They are legally defined, embedded in royal decrees known as letters patent. These are formal documents issued by the sovereign that set the rules for who is, and who isn't, part of the royal family's titled hierarchy. Tradition says that all grandchildren of the reigning monarch, through the male line, are entitled to become prince or princess. That's why William's own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were immediately elevated when Charles became king. And by that same rule, Archie and Lilibet should have been elevated too. That's the precedent. That's the expectation. That's the law as it stood. But William? He saw that precedent as a crack in the dam, and he was determined to seal it before the water could break through. So how did he do it? Insiders suggest William pushed his advisors and constitutional experts to explore ways of blocking those titles. Not simply withholding them for now, but shutting down the possibility altogether. That meant rewriting, or at least amending, the rules of succession through updated letters patent. Picture it. Lawyers and constitutional scholars summoned into secret meetings. courtiers whispering about adjustments. Every word weighed carefully. The aim? To legally enshrine the decision that Archie and Lilibet would never bear the titles of prince and princess, even if Charles wanted them to, even if Harry demanded it, even if Meghan campaigned for it across America. And the reasoning William used? Protection, survival, continuity. He argued that titles were not rights, but privileges, given to those who upheld the dignity of the crown. Harry and Meghan, in William's eyes, had forfeited that dignity. They had chosen another path. They had turned their backs on duty. And by doing so, they had forfeited the right to see their children elevated within the royal hierarchy. Now here's the contradiction that makes this so explosive. Meghan had once claimed, in her infamous interview with Oprah, that Archie was denied a title out of racism. She insisted it was about shutting him out, about keeping him vulnerable and unprotected. And yet, with William's block in place, her claims seemed to find new life. Except this time, it wasn't whispered racism in palace corridors. It was William himself, publicly drawing a line in the sand. So, let's ask the question, was William protecting the monarchy, or was he deliberately humiliating Meghan? Because that's exactly how Meghan saw it. To her, this wasn't constitutional housekeeping. This was targeted erasure, a deliberate decision to brand her children as outsiders, to keep them as less than. And for Meghan, that was intolerable. But William wasn't finished. Legal blocks weren't just about titles. They were about succession, inheritance, and recognition. By creating a constitutional framework to keep Archie and Lilibet out, William was also closing the door on future claims. Claims to status, claims to money, claims to influence. Think about that. By denying the titles now, William wasn't just shaping the present. He was rewriting the future, ensuring that when George, Charlotte, and Louis grow up, their royal standing is unquestioned, ensuring that Archie and Lilibet are forever placed outside the circle of influence, ensuring that history would record them as offshoots, not heirs. And here's the cruel brilliance of it. William's move left Harry with no legal leverage. None. Without titles, Archie and Lilibet became ordinary citizens in the eyes of the monarchy. They had no claims to funding, no claims to security, no claims to representation. Harry could rage, Meghan could cry, but William had built a wall higher than either of them could climb. But you know what's fascinating? Even as William was building this legal wall, Meghan was already plotting her counterattack. While William turned to lawyers and advisors, Meghan turned to the court of public opinion. She was ready to fight not in dusty legal chambers, but in the glare of cameras and headlines. Her weapon wasn't law. It was emotion, narrative, the power to shape perception. And when the block was finalized, Meghan prepared to do what she does best, tell a story of injustice, a story of cruelty, a story designed to turn the world against the monarchy. But before Meghan could act, someone inside the palace made a dangerous choice. Someone leaked the truth. Not the sanitized version. Not the polite family decision. The real reason William had blocked the titles. And that revelation would change the entire narrative. Because once the public learned William's true motivations, the story of Archie and Lilibet's blocked titles exploded into something bigger than anyone had anticipated. But what exactly was leaked? And who was brave enough, or reckless enough, to let it slip? What does Meghan Markle do when cornered? What does she do when the palace closes its doors, when the titles she fought so hard for are ripped away in one stroke? She doesn't retreat. She doesn't bow. Meghan fights back, not with lawyers and decrees, but with something far more powerful, the weapon of narrative. Because while William was locking the monarchy's doors with law, Meghan was unlocking another battlefield, the battlefield of perception. And perception, in the modern world, is everything. Let's rewind for a moment. Imagine Meghan in Montecito, hearing the news that William had not only refused to grant Archie and Lilibet titles, but had legally blocked them from ever receiving them. The tears, yes, but then the resolve. Meghan is many things, but she is not passive. She has spent years building a brand, a voice, a network of allies in Hollywood and beyond. And now, she knew she had to use them. This wasn't just a family slight. In Meghan's eyes, this was discrimination. It was injustice. It was the story she could take to the world, a story that would resonate not just with royal watchers, but with anyone who had ever felt excluded, diminished, erased. And that's how Meghan framed it. She told friends, "They've erased my children, but the world will know." So how do you make the world know? You start with the press. Insiders claim Meghan immediately reached out to sympathetic journalists in America. Subtle leaks began to surface. Whispers of deliberate cruelty, of William breaking centuries of tradition to punish Harry and Meghan. It was never official, never a statement from Meghan herself. But the tone was unmistakable. A narrative was being shaped. William, the cold brother. William, the jealous heir. William, the man who had cast innocent children into exile. And then there was Oprah, Meghan and Harry's great ally, the woman who had given them their biggest platform during that bombshell 2021 interview. Meghan reportedly toyed with the idea of a follow-up. Another sit-down, this time not about Meghan's pain, but about her children's stolen legacy. She told confidants that the world needs to hear the truth again. But Meghan's strategy wasn't just about interviews. She understood that modern power lies in entertainment, in streaming, in documentaries. And so, Netflix became part of her battlefield. Remember, the Sussexes already had a multi-million-dollar deal with the streaming giant. Now, Meghan saw an opportunity. Use their content not just to tell their love story, but to underline the injustices of the monarchy. Think about the timing. William had just sealed Archie and Lilibet's fate. The world's curiosity about the royals was at fever pitch. And Meghan, ever the strategist, saw her moment. She began feeding storylines into the couple's production pipeline. Storylines that painted the royal family as rigid, outdated, cruel. Storylines where Archie and Lilibet weren't just children, but symbols of what the monarchy was trying to erase. But here's the twist. While Meghan was shaping this narrative, William's team was watching. Carefully. They knew Meghan's game. They knew that if she won the public over, the legal block might not matter. If enough people sympathized with Meghan's story, the monarchy's credibility would be damaged beyond repair. So what did the palace do? They leaked too. And this time, the leaks weren't about William's firmness or Charles's silence. These leaks hinted at Meghan's desperation. Stories appeared in the British press about Meghan scrambling to rebuild her public image, about frantic calls to Hollywood insiders, about a woman unable to accept reality. The message was clear. Meghan wasn't a victim. She was a manipulator, using her children's names to stay relevant. The result? A narrative war. Meghan versus William. America versus Britain. Sympathy versus tradition. And in the middle of it all, two children who had no voice, no agency, but whose futures were being fought over like pieces on a chessboard. Now here's where the contradiction sharpens. Meghan wanted to use emotion, to paint Archie and Lilibet as wronged innocents. But William's camp had something she didn't. Facts. Hard, legal, constitutional facts. They argued that titles were a privilege, not a right. That William wasn't erasing his niece and nephew, but protecting the crown. That the monarchy couldn't survive if outsiders, critics, defectors, were allowed to use titles as weapons. And here's the question for you. Who do you believe? The mother in tears, fighting for her children's dignity? Or the heir to the throne, determined to preserve an ancient institution at any cost? Meghan, of course, wasn't asking that question. She was reframing it. To her, this wasn't about monarchy versus family. It was about cruelty versus compassion. And if she could win that argument in the court of public opinion, she could turn the world against William. But here's where the story takes its sharpest turn yet. Because just as Meghan was building her counter-strategy, just as her allies were rallying, just as the press began humming with her narrative, a leak from inside the palace exploded everything. Not a vague leak, not a whisper, a revelation. Someone revealed the real reason William had blocked the titles. And when that truth came out, it flipped the story upside down. Because the motive wasn't jealousy. It wasn't pettiness. It wasn't even punishment. It was something far more haunting. Something that made even Meghan's allies pause. Why would Prince William, a man so deeply bound to tradition, dare to break it? Why would he risk the wrath of his brother, the heartbreak of Meghan, and the fury of public opinion by blocking Archie and Lilibet's titles forever? What was the real reason, the hidden motivation, that drove him to act with such ruthless precision? That's the question that haunted palace corridors after William's decision leaked. Because at first glance, it looked like cold-blooded revenge. A jealous heir punishing his estranged brother. A bitter sibling feud taken to the extreme. But insiders began to whisper something different. Something darker. William's motive wasn't pettiness. It was fear. And not fear for himself. Not even fear of Harry. William was afraid for the monarchy itself. Let's step inside his world for a moment. William grew up watching the monarchy bend under pressure. He saw the chaos of the Diana years, the scandals that nearly brought the institution to its knees. He saw how the spares, the siblings, the secondary figures, often became the weak spots, the vulnerabilities that tabloids and opportunists could exploit. He lived through it. He was shaped by it. So when he looked at Harry and Meghan, he didn't see family. He saw danger. A loose cannon brother, a Hollywood wife, and 2 children who could, if given royal titles, one day wield them like weapons against the crown. Think about it. Imagine Archie, 20 years from now, bearing the title of prince. Imagine Lilibet, Princess Lilibet, standing on American stages, speaking against the monarchy while cashing in on the status of her title. To William, that wasn't a hypothetical. It was a nightmare. And that's the core of it. William didn't act out of spite. He acted out of self-preservation, not for himself, but for the monarchy he will one day lead. But here's where the contradictions tear everything open. Because while William feared repeating history, he was also repeating it in another way. Remember Queen Elizabeth's decision with Edward VIII? The abdicated king, stripped of power, left with only a hollow title? That was precedent. And William, whether he admitted it or not, was echoing that same cold calculation. Remove the risk. Protect the crown, whatever the cost. Now, consider this. Insiders claim that William specifically cited the future of his own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, when making his case. He feared that allowing Archie and Lilibet to hold titles would dilute the status of his heirs, that they would become competing symbols, that the monarchy's future would fracture into competing branches. To William, there could only be one future, his line, his children, his reign. Anything else was chaos. And here's where it gets even more emotional. Imagine him, sitting with advisors, quietly confessing that he didn't want George to grow up battling a cousin across the Atlantic. That he didn't want Charlotte's legitimacy questioned because Meghan could call her daughter Princess too. That he didn't want Louis overshadowed by the scandal machine Harry and Meghan had become. In William's mind, this wasn't cruelty. It was protection. He wasn't punishing Archie and Lilibet. He was shielding George, Charlotte, and Louis. But here's the haunting irony. In protecting his children, William doomed his brothers. 2 children who had no say, no voice, no blame. Locked out forever because of decisions made before they could even understand them. Innocent casualties of a royal war. And when Meghan realized this was William's true reasoning, her fury deepened. To her, it wasn't about protecting the monarchy. It was about favoritism. It was about valuing one set of children over another. She reportedly told friends, "He's protecting his children by destroying mine." But the palace wasn't done explaining. The leaks went further. Advisors began hinting that William also feared something else, Harry himself. They suggested William saw Harry as unstable, unpredictable, even dangerous to the institution. And if Harry was dangerous, then by extension, so were his children's titles. Ask yourself this. Could William really be so cold? Could he truly look at his niece and nephew and see only risk, only danger, only potential scandal? Or was this just the spin, the palace justification for a decision already made out of bitterness? That's the debate tearing royal watchers apart. Some believe William is right, that he had to act, that Archie and Lilibet, as Sussex children raised outside the monarchy, could never be trusted with titles. Others believe William's fear is his weakness, that in trying to protect the monarchy, he is eroding it from within. And then there's Charles, the father caught in the middle. Did he agree with William's reasoning? Or was his silence born of resignation, knowing he no longer had the strength to fight his son? Sources suggest Charles didn't object because deep down, he knew William's fears were valid. He knew the monarchy couldn't withstand decades more of Sussex drama. But Harry? Harry didn't see protection. He saw betrayal. He saw his brother's hidden motivation not as noble, but as cruel. And when he learned the truth, that William had blocked Archie and Lilibet not out of hate, but out of fear, it broke him even more. Because fear, in Harry's eyes, was no excuse for erasing his children's legacy. So, here's where we stand. William's hidden motivation has been exposed. He acted not out of anger, but out of survival instinct. And in doing so, he reshaped the monarchy forever. But what came next? Charles's silence. The king, faced with his son's fury, chose to say nothing. And that silence, that quiet acceptance, may have been the most devastating blow of all. Because when Harry turned to his father for help, what he got was emptiness. And that emptiness would push him closer to the edge than ever before. And what happened when Charles chose silence over action? What does it mean when a father says nothing? When silence is louder than any words he could speak? For Harry, it meant betrayal of the deepest kind. Because when King Charles had the chance to step in, to protect, to undo the damage William had caused, he chose to remain silent. And that silence burned Harry more than any speech, any rejection, any open condemnation ever could. Let's set the scene. Harry, reeling from William's announcement, turned to the one person he thought might still defend him. His father, Charles, newly crowned, the monarch with the power to issue letters patent and restore what had been taken. Harry believed that if he could just get through to his father, if he could just appeal to the bond between them, then Archie and Lilibet might still have a chance. But Charles didn't fight for them. He didn't push back against William. He didn't even question the decision. He let it stand. And here's the cruelest part. Charles's silence wasn't just absence. It was agreement. Insiders whisper that when William informed his father of his intentions, Charles didn't argue. Weary from health battles, drained by years of family drama, Charles reportedly sighed, nodded, and let the matter drop. If that's what you believe is best, he supposedly said. Those words, or something like them, became a death knell for Harry's children's royal futures. Now, why did Charles stay silent? Why didn't he defend his youngest son? Part of it was exhaustion. Charles has spent his life waiting for the throne, enduring scandal after scandal. Camilla, Diana, Andrew, Meghan, Harry, the controversies never ended. And now, in his twilight years, Charles wasn't looking for more battles. He wanted peace, continuity, stability. To him, siding with William, the heir, the future, was safer than siding with Harry, the rebel, the exile. But there was another layer, darker and more strategic. Charles knew that his reign would be brief compared to his mother's. He understood that William's reign would define the monarchy's survival in the 21st century. If William wanted a clean slate, if William wanted to cut off Harry's line, Charles wasn't going to interfere. Better to let William build the monarchy he would inherit, even if it meant sacrificing Harry's children. So Charles chose silence. And silence, in this case, was betrayal. Now picture Harry calling his father. Imagine the desperation in his voice. The pleading. Pa, you can't let him do this. You can stop this. And imagine the response. Hesitation. Deflection. A tired voice that says, we'll discuss it another time. A promise of nothing. A dismissal disguised as diplomacy. Harry didn't just lose titles that day. He lost the last shred of faith he had in his father. And Meghan? Meghan saw Charles's silence as confirmation of everything she had always feared. To her, this wasn't just William's decision. This was institutional. It was coordinated. Charles's silence, in her eyes, proved that the monarchy had conspired to erase her children. She told friends, they don't want my children. They never did. But here's where the contradictions bite hardest. Because some insiders argue that Charles's silence wasn't approval at all, it was weakness. That Charles, deep down, didn't agree with William but lacked the strength to oppose him. That he feared confrontation. That he allowed William to lead, not because he wanted it, but because he couldn't stop it. And doesn't that make it worse? A father too weak to defend his son. A king too tired to fight for his grandchildren. Now think of the symbolism. Charles, the monarch, head of the family, sitting quietly while his heir seizes control. William taking power not just as Prince of Wales, but as de facto leader of the monarchy. It was a silent transfer of authority. The moment Charles ceded not just titles, but his moral authority to his son. And Harry felt it. He felt the shift. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that his father was no longer in charge. That William was the one calling the shots. That William, not Charles, was shaping the monarchy's future. The devastation of that realization cannot be overstated. Harry, once the beloved younger son, the spare, with a safety net, suddenly understood he was truly alone. No titles for his children. No defense from his father. No path back into the family fold. And what do people do when they feel completely abandoned? They lash out. They burn bridges. They go nuclear. Harry began to spiral. He confided in Meghan that he felt his mother, Diana, would be horrified. He raged about history repeating itself, about a cold, unfeeling institution destroying the vulnerable. He told friends he was ready to bring the whole thing down. Meanwhile, palace aides watched nervously. Because Charles's silence wasn't just hurting Harry, it was destabilizing the monarchy. Every time the king refused to speak, speculation grew. Was Charles too weak? Was William already king in all but name? Was the monarchy splitting in two? The cracks widened. And Meghan, ever the strategist, knew how to use those cracks. If Charles wouldn't speak, then she would. If William wouldn't bend, then she would break him in the court of public opinion. But before Meghan could act, before Harry could decide how far he was willing to go, the tension inside the palace reached a breaking point. Because Charles's silence wasn't just betrayal, it was a signal. A signal that Harry was no longer protected. A signal that William had free reign. And when Harry realized his father had abandoned him, he wasn't just furious. He was dangerous. Because silence, in this family, doesn't mean peace. It means war is coming. What happens when a woman who has built her entire identity on resilience finally cracks? What happens when a carefully curated image of control and poise shatters under the weight of betrayal? That's what insiders describe when they talk about Meghan's meltdown in the wake of William's decision and Charles's silence. Because Meghan Markle, the actress turned duchess, the woman who had stood toe-to-toe with the British monarchy and told her truth on global television, was not prepared for this. She wasn't prepared for the complete erasure of her children's royal futures. And when she realized there was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to bargain for, the dam finally broke. Sources close to Montecito recall nights of tears. Meghan pacing, ranting, sometimes collapsing into sobs. She reportedly screamed, "They've stolen everything," over and over, as though repeating it might somehow undo the decision. The injustice, in her mind, wasn't just political. It was personal. It was about Archie and Lilibet, her babies, being denied the recognition she believed was their birthright. But here's the twist. Meghan's meltdown wasn't just sadness. It was rage. White-hot rage. Rage at William for his ruthlessness. Rage at Charles for his silence. Rage at an institution she had always claimed was archaic, cruel, racist, now proving her point in the most devastating way possible. And she didn't hide it from Harry. If anything, she amplified it. Meghan reportedly told him, "They'll never accept us. They'll never accept them. This is war." Now let's pause here. Ask yourself, is this rage justified, or is it dangerous? On one hand, Meghan's fury is understandable. What mother wouldn't be devastated to see her children cast aside? But on the other hand, her reaction wasn't just maternal. It was strategic, because Meghan saw an opportunity in her pain. She began calling allies. Doria, her mother, became a sounding board. Hollywood friends like Tyler Perry and Oprah reportedly received frantic calls. Meghan told them all the same thing. "They've erased my children, and I won't let them get away with it." Imagine those conversations. Meghan, her voice trembling, explaining that the British monarchy had officially cut her children out, that William had blocked their titles forever, that Charles had stood by and done nothing. To her allies, this was Meghan's darkest moment, but also her most dangerous. Because when Meghan feels cornered, she doesn't collapse. She attacks. And her meltdown fueled that attack. But here's the contradiction that made this moment so volatile. Meghan wanted to explode publicly, but Harry wanted to strike privately. She wanted cameras. He wanted confrontation. She wanted Oprah. He wanted revenge on William's inner circle. Their rage matched, but their strategies clashed. That tension boiled inside Montecito. Friends say Meghan accused Harry of being too soft, of still hoping for reconciliation. Harry snapped back, saying Meghan was reckless, that turning this into another media spectacle would only make things worse. Their arguments grew louder, more frequent. And yet, beneath the fighting, they were united in one thing: their hatred of William's decision. Meghan's fury also reignited old wounds. She reportedly brought up the racism claims again, pointing to this as proof. "They'll never let a child of color be a prince," she told confidants. For Meghan, the decision wasn't about William protecting the monarchy. It was about exclusion, about punishment, about prejudice disguised as protocol. But palace insiders tell another story. They say Meghan's meltdown was anticipated, that William's team predicted she would unravel. And they were ready. Even as Meghan vented to her Hollywood circle, palace aides were planting stories in the British press. Meghan distraught. Meghan lashes out. Sussexes in turmoil. They framed her meltdown not as righteous anger, but as hysteria. And this is where things got cruel. Because the more Meghan melted down, the more the palace painted her as unstable. The more she raged, the calmer William looked in comparison. The public began to see a contrast. William, the composed heir. Meghan, the emotional outsider. It was exactly the image the palace wanted. So where does this leave us? Meghan, in tears, isolated, furious, desperate. Harry, torn between his wife's rage and his own sense of betrayal. And the palace, calm and calculated, letting their silence speak volumes. But here's the question I want you to wrestle with. Was Meghan's meltdown weakness? Or was it her most powerful weapon yet? Because sometimes, raw emotion can move people in ways logic never can. Sometimes, a tearful mother is a stronger image than a stoic king. And Meghan knew this. Even in her darkest hours, she knew the cameras would one day capture her side of the story. And when they did, she would make sure the world saw her as the wronged mother fighting against a cruel monarchy. But before that story could be told, something else happened. Harry's reaction to Meghan's meltdown took everything to a new, dangerous level. Because Harry wasn't content with tears. He wanted to fight. He wanted to threaten. He wanted to burn the bridges once and for all. And when Harry made his threat, it sent shockwaves through the palace. Because what he threatened to reveal wasn't just gossip. It was secrets. Deep, dangerous secrets that could shake the monarchy to its core. And that's where we turn next. What happens when a man who has lost everything finally decides to weaponize the only thing he has left? That's where Prince Harry found himself after William's decision and Meghan's meltdown. He had no leverage, no titles for his children, no father willing to defend him, no brother willing to forgive him. But he did have one thing: secrets. And Harry knew those secrets could burn the monarchy to the ground. Chapter 8 is the turning point, the moment Harry crossed from wounded son to active threat. Imagine the scene. Meghan is pacing, distraught, replaying every cruel twist of fate in her head. Harry is slumped in a chair, phone in his hand, face pale with anger. They've argued. They've cried. They've tried to plan. But nothing changes the reality. William has won. The titles are gone. And in that silence, Harry mutters something that makes Meghan freeze. They don't know what I know. For words. And with those words, the entire atmosphere shifted. Because Harry wasn't just a hurt brother anymore. He was a man sitting on a time bomb. A man who had lived his entire life behind palace walls, watching, listening, learning. A man who had seen things, heard things, experienced things that could shatter the carefully polished image of the royal family forever. Now, think about what that means. Harry isn't a distant relative. He's not a gossip columnist or a palace aide. He's Diana's son, Charles's son, William's brother. He has lived the scandals, the secrets, the betrayals firsthand. And if he chose to unleash them, there would be no stopping the fallout. So what did Harry threaten to reveal? Insiders say he hinted at unspoken truths about his mother's death, at backroom dealings between courtiers, at private conversations that, if ever made public, would devastate Charles and William's reputations. He suggested he knew about financial scandals, about inappropriate relationships, about cover-ups the public could barely imagine. And remember, this isn't speculation. Harry has already proven he's willing to spill royal secrets. His memoir Spare tore open wounds many thought would remain buried forever. He accused William of physical assault. He exposed Camilla's manipulation. He painted Charles as weak, distant, cold. If he was willing to print those truths, what else is he holding back? Now, here's the emotional beat. Harry's threat wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. In his mind, he had no other option. William had cornered him. Charles had abandoned him. Meghan was crumbling under the weight of her rage. And so Harry decided that if the monarchy wanted to erase his children, he would erase the monarchy's reputation in return. But here's the contradiction. Even as Harry made these threats, those closest to him wondered, was he serious, or was it a desperate bluff? Because Harry's greatest weapon, those secrets, was also his greatest risk. If he unleashed them, there was no going back. No reconciliation. No return. He would burn the bridge so completely that even the ashes would be gone. And yet, maybe that was the point. Maybe Harry wanted to burn it all down. Insiders described tense phone calls during this period. Harry reaching out to old friends in London, hinting at another book. Meghan floating the idea of a second Oprah interview, this time with new bombshells. Aides in Montecito terrified that Harry would say too much in a moment of anger and accidentally set off a firestorm he couldn't control. Meanwhile, the palace knew exactly what was happening. William's team had already prepared for this possibility. They expected Harry to lash out, to threaten, to hint at secrets. And they had a countermeasure: leaks. Carefully timed, surgically placed leaks that painted Harry as unstable, irrational, even paranoid. Prince Harry threatens monarchy again, one headline read. Insiders fear Duke of Sussex will release more damaging claims. The narrative was set. Harry wasn't a whistleblower. He was a ticking time bomb. And the cruel brilliance of it? The more Harry threatened, the more the palace framed him as dangerous. The more he raged, the calmer William appeared. The contrast grew sharper with every passing day. William, the steady future king. Harry, the angry exile with nothing left to lose. But here's the twist. What if Harry wasn't bluffing? What if those secrets are real and he's willing to use them? Because remember, every time Harry has threatened before, he's followed through. The Oprah interview happened. The Netflix docuseries happened. The memoir happened. Why wouldn't the next step happen too? So, ask yourself, what secrets could Harry be sitting on? What revelations could shake the monarchy so badly that William felt he had to block Archie and Lilibet's titles preemptively? Because that's the haunting thought behind this chapter. William's legal block wasn't just about protecting his children. It was about preparing for Harry's wrath. William knew the threats were coming, and he was ready. But Harry wasn't done. His threats escalated. He spoke of exposing everything. And that word, everything, sent shivers down the spines of courtiers who knew exactly how much he had seen. And as Harry's threats grew louder, the palace prepared a devastating counterstrike. A preemptive move to discredit him so completely that even if he revealed the truth, no one would believe it. Because when the palace strikes back, it doesn't just defend itself. It destroys. What does the monarchy do when it senses an existential threat? When a member of its own bloodline threatens to tear down centuries of carefully built mystique, it doesn't wait. It doesn't negotiate. It strikes first. That's what happened the moment Harry began hinting at his arsenal of secrets. William's camp, already anticipating his every move, launched a preemptive strike that stunned even seasoned palace watchers. This was not clumsy. This was not reactive. It was cold, precise, ruthless. A campaign carefully designed to discredit Harry before he could even open his mouth. Because if the public stopped trusting him, then his secrets, no matter how explosive, would carry no weight. Let's peel this back. The very night whispers of Harry's threats began trickling through private channels, the palace machine whirred to life. Senior aides, crisis managers, and PR strategists were summoned. The question was simple. How do you neutralize a man who has nothing left to lose? The answer: you destroy his credibility. Almost overnight, headlines began appearing in the British press. Harry unstable, friends fear for his state of mind. Prince William quietly concerned for brother's well-being. Sussex marriage under strain amid growing isolation. Notice the pattern? It wasn't direct attacks. It was subtle, sympathetic. A portrait of Harry as unhinged, fragile, erratic. The palace didn't need to call him a liar. They just needed the world to doubt his stability. Think about the brilliance of this. By painting Harry as paranoid and unstable, the monarchy created a shield. If Harry did reveal anything, no matter how true, no matter how damaging, the narrative was already set. It's just Harry again, lashing out. And Meghan? She wasn't spared. Leaks began targeting her too. Reports of diva behavior resurfaced. Old staff complaints were recycled. Stories about Netflix disappointment and podcast cancellations filled the tabloids. Meghan was painted as manipulative, controlling, and desperate for relevance. Together, they were portrayed as a chaotic duo spiraling out of control. Now here's the kicker: the timing. These stories didn't appear by accident. They dropped just as Harry's threats reached their peak. The palace wasn't responding to him. They were preempting him. They were seizing the narrative before he even had the chance to shape it. But here's where it gets darker. Sources suggest this wasn't just a PR offensive. It was personal. William himself reportedly signed off on the strategy. He wanted his brother neutralized. He wanted Meghan humiliated. He wanted the monarchy safe, at any cost. And the cost, in this case, was Harry's reputation. And here's the contradiction. On one hand, William's move was brilliant. He effectively blunted Harry's ability to do damage. On the other hand, it revealed something terrifying. Just how far the palace is willing to go to protect itself. Imagine a family so consumed by survival that it would rather destroy its own son than risk scandal. Now, consider Harry's reaction. He saw the headlines. He read the leaks. And he knew exactly where they came from. His fury turned to desperation. "They're trying to destroy me," he reportedly told Meghan. "They won't stop until I'm gone." That paranoia, justified or not, drove Harry deeper into isolation. And Meghan's response? She told him the only way to fight back was to go louder, to tell more, to reveal everything. If the palace wanted war, Meghan urged him, then give them war. But Harry hesitated. Because here's the cruel genius of the palace's strike. It worked. Even his allies began to question him. American media, once sympathetic, now carried the same undertone. Harry and Meghan as erratic, unstable, dramatic. The couple who cried wolf one too many times. The preemptive strike wasn't just a smear campaign. It was a silencing strategy. And yet, in Montecito, Harry simmered. He told friends, "They think they've beaten me. They think they can silence me. But I still have the truth." So now the stage was set. William had secured the monarchy's position with a brutal preemptive strike. Harry was cornered, desperate, but still clinging to the power of secrets. Meghan was furious, urging him to go public. And Charles? Silent, watching the war between his sons escalate beyond control. But the palace's strike had an unintended consequence. In their eagerness to destroy Harry, they revealed just how ruthless William could be. For the first time, whispers began circulating not about Harry's instability, but about William's ambition, about the lengths he would go to protect his crown. And that revelation shifted the narrative yet again. Because suddenly, the question wasn't just, is Harry unstable? It was, what is William hiding? And that question would lead us directly into Meghan's next move, taking her fight to America. Because if Britain wouldn't listen, Meghan believed, then America would. And what came next was her boldest, most desperate play yet. What do you do when one nation turns its back on you? When the headlines at home are poison? When the palace has outmaneuvered you? When your very name has been turned into a punchline? If you're Meghan Markle, you look west. You look to America. You look to the one stage still willing to give you the microphone. And that's exactly what she did. She appealed directly to the U.S. audience, hoping to turn the tide in her favor. Chapter 10 is Meghan's counteroffensive, waged not with lawyers or palace advisors, but with the tools she knows best: media, celebrity, and public opinion. Picture the setting in Montecito. Meghan, still reeling from William's brutal block and Charles's silence, sits with Harry in their lavish California home. The British press is tearing them apart. The palace machine is painting them as unstable, manipulative, hysterical. Meghan looks at Harry and says the words that would define their strategy. They may own the UK, but America is ours. And she wasn't wrong. In Britain, they were outcasts. But in America, Meghan still had a base of support. She was seen by many as a victim of racism, of institutional cruelty, of an ancient system trying to silence a modern woman. She had Hollywood. She had Oprah. She had Netflix. She still had allies willing to give her the spotlight. So, Meghan began plotting her appeal. It started with subtle PR moves, lifestyle pieces in sympathetic magazines, appearances that emphasized her role as a mother fighting for her children, not as a duchess waging war. She wanted to reframe herself not as an ex-royal, but as a wronged woman. Not as a diva, but as a protective mother. And the key narrative? Archie and Lilibet, two innocent children, denied titles, denied recognition, denied their birthright. To Meghan, framing the story this way was genius. Because who could blame a mother for fighting for her children? Who could side with a monarchy that erased toddlers from history books? But Meghan knew PR alone wasn't enough. She needed something bigger. She needed platforms. And that's where Netflix and Spotify came back into play. The couple's multi-million-dollar deals, once mocked as overhyped, suddenly became weapons. Meghan began pushing to shape new projects, docuseries, specials, even children's programming, around the idea of identity, belonging, and injustice. She wanted Archie and Lilibet's story woven into everything. She wanted America to see her children not as forgotten royals, but as symbols of resilience. And then came the whispers of Oprah. A second sit-down. Not a rehash of the 2021 bombshell interview, but a new chapter. A chance to reveal William's decision to the American public. A chance to tell the world that Archie and Lilibet had been deliberately erased, not because of tradition, but because of choice. Because of William. Because of fear. Insiders claim Meghan floated the idea to Oprah's team. The world needs to hear how my children have been treated. And while nothing was finalized, the very possibility sent chills through the palace. They knew what Oprah had done to them the first time. Another interview could be catastrophic. But Meghan wasn't relying on interviews alone. She began mobilizing Hollywood allies. Tyler Perry, who had once given the couple refuge, was reportedly back in the loop. Friends and media, celebrities sympathetic to Meghan's cause, were quietly reminded of her struggle. The goal wasn't just sympathy. It was pressure. Pressure on the monarchy from across the Atlantic, a steady drumbeat of criticism designed to weaken William's iron wall. And here's where the contradictions collide. Because while Meghan pushed this narrative in America, the palace doubled down in Britain. The British press ridiculed her efforts, mocking her as desperate, out of touch, clinging to relevance. Headlines sneered at her Hollywood crusade. And that split, America versus Britain, became sharper than ever before. Ask yourself this. Could Meghan actually win the war of narratives? Could American sympathy outweigh British tradition? Could Hollywood glamour outshine Kensington steel? Because Meghan believed it could. She told friends that America was the future, not Britain. That the monarchy was fading, while Hollywood was eternal. That Archie and Lilibet didn't need crowns, they needed cameras. That if the UK denied them titles, the US would give them something even more powerful, fame. But here's the haunting irony. As Meghan pushed harder in America, she also made William's case for him. Every interview, every photo shoot, every Netflix special reinforced William's fear that if Archie and Lilibet had titles, they would be used as tools for profit, props in Meghan's media empire. And that irony was not lost on the public. For every sympathetic voice in America, there was another asking, is Meghan fighting for her children or for her brand? But the real blow came from an unexpected corner. Because just as Meghan was ramping up her U.S. campaign, an expert in constitutional law spoke out. And what they revealed was devastating. They explained that without royal titles, Archie and Lilibet were also denied access to certain protections. Security, status, international recognition, all tied, in part, to their titles. Meghan seized on this revelation. She framed it not as a political slight, but as a matter of safety. My children aren't just erased, she told friends. They're exposed. They're vulnerable. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about recognition. It was about danger. Meghan began hinting in interviews that William's decision had put her children at risk. It was a bold, emotional pivot, and it nearly worked. But William, ever the strategist, saw it coming. And when Meghan tried to use security as her new argument, William made a move so cold, so public, that it crushed her narrative in one stroke. Because for the first time, William himself spoke, indirectly, carefully,